I don't even know where to start, because if I start in the middle, it sounds like an excuse, and if I start at the beginning, it sounds like a lie. But maybe that's the truth of it, that love never starts cleanly. It leaks in from all the wrong places. My name doesn't matter. I'm 32, and for most of my 20s, I thought I had my life figured out. I had a good job in marketing, a small apartment that smelled like old coffee and lavender candles, and a boyfriend I thought I would marry. His name was Ryan. He was the kind of man who made everything look like it had purpose, the kind who kept his shirts ironed even when no one was watching, who texted his mother every Sunday without fail. We'd been together for 6 years when he proposed. I said yes, even though I'd stopped being sure months before that. You don't realize when you're drifting until you look up and see how far you've gone. I kept telling myself all relationships go through dry spells. That real love isn't fireworks, it's endurance. And for a while, I believed that. Then I met someone else. It didn't start like the cliché, no electric moment, no forbidden flirtation. His name was Adrian. He joined the same firm as a new creative lead. He was different from Ryan in every possible way, careless where Ryan was careful, restless where Ryan was steady. He made bad jokes and laughed too loudly at his own punchlines, but he had this way of looking at me that made me feel like he saw something buried under the years I'd spent trying to be composed. It started small, lunches that went long, texts about work that turned personal. Then one night after an event when we were both a little too drunk, he walked me to my car and said, "You know, you don't laugh like someone who's happy." I don't know why that hit me the way it did. Maybe because no one had said it before. Not even Ryan, especially not Ryan. That night, I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car outside my building, staring at the ring on my finger. The streetlights hit it in a way that made it look like it was glowing too brightly, like it was mocking me. I told myself nothing had happened, that it was just conversation. But deep down, I knew the line had already been crossed. For weeks, I tried to shake it. I distanced myself at work, made excuses, buried myself in planning the wedding, menus, venues, flowers. But the thing about pretending is that it feeds itself. The more I tried to convince myself I didn't want Adrian, the more I dreamed about him. The first time we kissed, it was raining. Of course it was raining. I'd stayed late working on a presentation, and he came by my desk to say goodnight. We were both tired. My hair was sticking to my face, my blouse damp from a run outside earlier. He reached out just to brush a strand away, and I don't know who moved first. I only know that when it happened, it felt inevitable. The worst part, it wasn't thrilling, it was sad. Like we'd both just agreed to ruin something quietly. After that, the affair, if that's even the right word, lasted 6 months. 6 months of stolen moments, half-truths, the constant ache of wanting what I couldn't claim. Adrian was single, but that almost made it worse. He could afford to be honest. I couldn't. Ryan started to notice. The distance. The way I'd flinch when he touched me. Once he asked if I was okay. I told him I was just stressed from work. He kissed my forehead and told me to rest. I went into the bathroom, locked the door, and cried. I wish I could tell you I ended it before it went too far. I didn't. What ended it was reality, the kind that always catches up, no matter how carefully you try to outrun it. One night, I got home late and found Ryan sitting on the couch, my phone in his hands. He'd seen the messages. Not all of them, but enough. He didn't yell. He just looked at me, really looked, and said, "You could have just told me you weren't happy." And all I could say was, I didn't know how. It's been 3 years since that night. Ryan moved out the next day. I stayed in the apartment because I couldn't bear to lose everything at once. Adrian and I tried to make something real out of the wreckage, but it turns out love born from lies doesn't know how to survive honesty. We lasted 4 months. People like to believe that affairs are about passion. They're not. They're about loneliness, the kind that grows so slowly you mistake it for normal. I don't talk to either of them now. Ryan is married. Adrian moved to another city. And me, I'm still here, still untangling what it means to be the villain in your own story. If I've learned anything, it's that heartbreak doesn't always come from being left. Sometimes it comes from realizing you were the one who left first, emotionally, quietly, long before anyone noticed. The first few months after Ryan left were a blur of noise and silence. Noise from the city outside my window, the construction that started at 7 a.m., the couple that always fought 2 floors down. Silence inside my apartment, where everything echoed because half of the furniture was gone. I thought grief would feel like a sharp wound, but it was slower than that. It leaked into everything. I'd make coffee and forget to drink it. I'd go to the store and come home with groceries I didn't remember choosing. I'd reach for my phone 100 times a day, only to stop halfway through typing his name. People said things like, "At least now you can focus on yourself," as if self-improvement could replace the comfort of another heartbeat in the room. I nodded and pretended to believe them. What I really did was work. I volunteered for projects I didn't care about, stayed late until security flicked the lights. My boss thought I was driven. Really, I just didn't know where else to go. Adrian called once. His name flashing on the screen made my chest ache, but I let it ring out. Then he texted, "I miss you." I stared at it for a long time. The old reflexes kicked in. I wanted to answer, to reach for something familiar even if it burned. But I didn't. I deleted the message, turned off my phone, and sat there until the room went dark. That was the first time I chose silence over chaos. It didn't feel brave. It just felt necessary. Therapy came later. My friend Mia practically dragged me to the first session. I spent the first 20 minutes explaining that I wasn't the kind of person who needed therapy, which my therapist, Dr. Leung, took in stride. She just said, "Tell me why you think that." And I did. I told her everything, the affair, the lies, the guilt that hung around like a shadow. When I finished, she didn't say much. She just asked, "When was the last time you felt like you knew yourself?" I didn't have an answer. For months, that question haunted me more than the memories. I started noticing how small I'd made myself in that relationship, how careful, how accommodating. Ryan hadn't asked for that. I'd done it on my own, piece by piece, in the name of keeping peace. I mistook predictability for safety. Dr. Leung said something once that stuck with me. Infidelity isn't always about desire. Sometimes it's a rebellion against the version of yourself you built for someone else. I thought about that for weeks. Because the truth was, I didn't cheat to find someone better. I cheated to find someone who saw me as more than the quiet, responsible girl who kept everything running smoothly. Adrian saw the chaos in me and didn't flinch. He made me feel alive, but also unmoored, reckless. I mistook that intensity for freedom, not realizing that freedom isn't about escape. It's about staying. I spent that year rebuilding small things. Cooking real meals instead of eating takeout. Calling my sister just to talk. Reading before bed instead of scrolling through pictures of lives that looked cleaner than mine. It was boring, sometimes, but there was a comfort in the boredom. A year after the breakup, I saw Ryan again. It was at a cafe near the office. He was with someone, a woman with kind eyes, wearing one of those scarves people wear when they're comfortable in their skin. He smiled when he saw me, not with bitterness, but with something softer. We talked for 5 minutes. It was polite, almost warm. When he left, he said, "I'm glad you're doing okay." I walked home afterward and cried, not because I wanted him back, but because I finally understood that forgiveness doesn't need an apology. That night, I sat on my balcony and looked out at the city, the traffic crawling along like a heartbeat. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to explain myself to anyone. I was still learning how to be alone, still learning that loneliness isn't failure, it's space. Space to listen to yourself again. It's funny, I used to think love was about finding the right person. Now, I think it's about learning to face the parts of yourself you used to hide. And sometimes, if you're lucky, someone comes along who meets you there. But even if they don't, that doesn't make your story less complete. Because maybe the real ending isn't who you end up with. It's who you finally stop running from. 3 years later, I was 30, and the city felt different, quieter somehow, like the volume had turned down after a long song. I'd moved apartments again, this time to a place with light that spilled through the windows in the mornings and a view of the skyline that made everything feel temporary in the best way. I'd settled into a rhythm. Work was steady, friends consistent, weekends filled with farmers' markets and long walks without purpose. I'd stopped trying to fix myself and started just noticing myself. The small things. The way I always hummed when I cooked. The way I still slept curled up on one side of the bed. The way I smiled at strangers without realizing it. And then came Alex. He wasn't dramatic like Adrian or steadfast like Ryan. He was just there, calm, steady. We met at a friend's birthday party, the kind where no one knows half the people in the room and the music. Too loud to talk. I remember he made some offhand comment about how everyone was pretending to have fun, and I laughed, genuinely laughed, for the first time in a long time. We started seeing each other after that. Slowly, cautiously. No grand gestures or confessions, just dinners, texts that didn't leave me anxious, quiet Sundays spent reading on opposite ends of the couch. He had this way of listening that made me feel like silence was allowed to exist between us without being awkward. Sometimes we'd talk about nothing, childhood memories, favorite coffee orders, places we wanted to travel. Other times, he'd ask things that cut deeper. "Do you think people ever really forgive themselves?" he asked once, looking out over the city from my balcony. "I don't know," I said. "Maybe forgiveness isn't a one-time thing. Maybe it's a daily choice." He nodded like he understood, and maybe he did. There was a moment, months later, when I caught myself feeling content. Not euphoric, not obsessed, just steady. And that scared me more than any heartbreak ever had, because I realized how addicted I'd been to chaos, to the highs and lows that made me feel alive, even when they were destroying me. With Alex, there was no chaos. There was patience. And sometimes that felt too still, like standing in a quiet room waiting for something to break. One night, after dinner, he reached across the table and said, "You always look like you're somewhere else when things get good." I didn't know what to say. He smiled, not unkindly. "You don't have to tell me where that place is, just don't stay there too long." That night, I cried in the shower, not because of him, but because of how gentle he was. Because I realized I didn't know how to receive something that didn't hurt. But I tried. God, I tried. Months turned into a year. We built a quiet life together, weekend trips, movie nights, small arguments that ended with soft apologies. There was a peace in it I hadn't known before. And then, one night, he told me he'd gotten a job offer in another city. He said it softly, like he didn't want to hurt me. "It's a good opportunity," he said, "but I don't want to make this harder for you." The words hung between us. I could have asked him to stay. I could have said I'd move with him. But something deep inside told me this was one of those moments where love meant letting go, not holding tighter. So I smiled, even as my chest ached. "You should go," I said. We didn't say goodbye that night. We just sat there, side by side, watching the skyline. I rested my head on his shoulder and thought about how love can be both right and temporary. After he left, I didn't fall apart. I missed him deeply, yes, but it wasn't the kind of missing that consumed me. It was softer, sad but manageable. And I realized that maybe that was the point all along. To love without losing yourself. To grieve without unraveling. To keep your heart open, even after it's been broken more times than you'd like to admit. Now, sometimes, when the city lights blur outside my window, I think about all the versions of me that loved and lost and still dared to try again. I'm not sure if I'll ever find the kind of love that stays, but I've finally learned that the love that heals doesn't have to come from someone else. Sometimes it's just the quiet decision to keep living, to keep hopping, to keep believing that your story, messy as it is still worth telling. Years passed, not quickly but quietly. The kind of time that doesn't announce itself, just folds into your life until you realize whole seasons have changed without you noticing. I was 35 when I moved again, this time to a smaller apartment closer to the park. It wasn't loneliness that drove me, just a need for quiet. A need for my space to reflect who I'd become instead of who I'd been. The walls were painted white. Clean, bare. I filled them slowly, deliberately. Photos I'd taken, a few paintings from local artists, books stacked where they didn't belong. My life had softened around the edges, not from resignation but from acceptance. Every once in a while I'd think about them, Ryan, Adrian, even Alex. Each one a different kind of ache. I never hated any of them, even the ones who broke me the hardest. Hate took too much energy. What stayed instead were small, vivid moments. The way Ryan's laughter filled a room, the way Adrian's voice dropped when he was honest, the way Alex's hands were steady when everything else felt uncertain. They were ghosts, but gentle ones. Sometimes, late at night, I'd reread old journal entries. The words felt foreign now, written by someone desperate to be understood, to be chosen. I'd whisper to her, "Me, you made it, you're okay." And I meant it. There's a strange peace in realizing no one's coming to save you. That no apology, no grand reconciliation, no perfect relationship will undo what's already been done. You just learn to live with the echoes. One morning, I woke up before sunrise and made coffee. The city was still sleeping, its hum softened by the fog. I sat by the window, mug warm in my hands, and it hit me that this quiet, unremarkable moment was happiness. Not the kind that burns fast and bright, but the kind that stays. I thought about calling Alex once, just to say I hoped he was well. Maybe he was married by now or living in another city, still calm and steady and kind. But I didn't. Some things are meant to remain untouched, preserved by distance. Instead, I started writing again. Not for anyone else, no audience, no expectation. Just to make sense of everything I'd lived through. I wrote about the versions of love that hurt and the ones that healed, the ways people leave, and the quiet strength it takes to stay. Writing didn't fix anything. It didn't erase the mistakes or fill the empty spaces, but it gave them shape. It made them mean something. I still go on long walks through the city sometimes, past all the places that used to hold pieces of me. The coffee shop where Ryan first told me he loved me. The bridge where Adrian kissed me under the streetlight. The bookstore Alex used to linger in. They're all just places now. The memories have faded into the noise of everyday life. But sometimes, when the air smells like rain, I feel them close. The people I was, the loves I lost. Not haunting me, just walking beside me for a while. And maybe that's what healing really is. Not erasing the past, but learning to live with it, letting it soften instead of harden you. I don't know if I'll ever fall in love again, not the way I used to. But I hope that if I do, it's gentle. I hope it's kind. I hope it's quiet in all the right ways. Until then, I'll keep choosing myself. Not because I have to, but because I finally want to. I looked out over the city one last time before leaving for work, and in that brief, still moment, I realized I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for someone to come back. Not for closure. Not even for love. I was already living the ending I used to dream of. One where peace didn't come from someone else's arms, but from my own. And maybe, after everything, that's the kind of love story that matters most. That night I left the window open. The city breathed in and out below me, the sound of passing cars and distant laughter carrying through the air. I lay on my couch, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how strange it was that peace could feel so heavy. It wasn't sadness, exactly. It was something quieter, like the weight of understanding. I realized I didn't want to erase the people I'd loved, even the ones who hurt me. They were written into me, line by line, like verses of a song that never really ended, just changed key. I used to believe love was supposed to save you. Now I think it's just supposed to teach you. The next morning, I went for a walk before the world fully woke. The sky was turning from gray to gold, and everything smelled like wet pavement and possibility. I passed a bakery, watched a couple laugh over coffee, saw a man with a dog who stopped to tie his shoe and smiled when the dog licked his face. Ordinary moments, beautiful in their ordinariness. I found myself smiling too. There was a time when I thought healing would look like perfection, like I'd wake up one day and all the hurt would be gone, and I'd feel whole again. But healing turned out to be quieter. It was paying my bills on time, calling my mom, making dinner for myself because I wanted to, not because someone else was coming over. It was forgiving myself for the things I didn't know back then, for the ways I clung too tightly or walked away too soon. It's funny, the way time softens even the hardest edges. I used to replay the endings over and over, wondering what I could have done differently. But lately, when I think of Ryan, I don't see the betrayal. I see his smile when he made pancakes on Sunday mornings. When I think of Adrian, I don't see the lies. I see the way his voice trembled the night he told me he was sorry. And with Alex, I just see calmness, steadiness, a moment that was always meant to pass. They all taught me something. Maybe that's what love is for, not forever, not even necessarily happiness, but lessons. A mirror held up to who you are, who you were, and who you're still becoming. Sometimes I wonder what it would feel like to fall in love again, now that I'm not searching for someone to complete me. Maybe it would feel simpler, less like a storm and more like rain. Something that nourishes instead of destroys. I don't need it, though. That's the difference. I used to think needing someone was the deepest form of love. Now I think the deepest form is choosing someone when you don't have to. That night, I wrote again. Just a few lines in my notebook. There's no grand ending to this story. No fireworks, no final kiss. Just a woman who learned how to stay when everyone else left. Who learned how to be alone without being lonely. Who learned that love doesn't always mean holding on, it can also mean letting go with grace. I closed the notebook and sat in the silence. It was almost comforting now, that stillness that used to scare me. Outside, the city kept moving. Lights flickered in the distance. Somewhere, a car horn blared, a siren wailed, a couple argued, another made up. Life, in all its messy, imperfect rhythm. And I realized that for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to begin. I was already in the middle of it, my life, my story, unfolding exactly as it was meant to. So I poured myself a glass of wine, opened the window a little wider, and let the air rush in. And as I sat there, watching the world breathe, I whispered to no one in particular, "Thank you, for all of it." It wasn't forgiveness, not exactly. It was gratitude, for the love that broke me open, for the pain that shaped me, for the woman who came out the other side, softer, stronger, and finally at peace. And maybe that's all the closure I'll ever need. A few years slipped away after that, quietly and without any big turning points to mark their passing. I didn't meet someone new right away. I didn't fall into another great love or start over with the intensity I used to crave. I just lived. I went to work, I made friends, I filled my weekends with little things that brought me joy, wandering through antique shops, going to the movies alone, learning how to make perfect risotto. The small, steady rituals of a life that finally belonged only to me. Sometimes, when I walked home at night, I'd catch a glimpse of my reflection in a store window and stop for a second. There she was, me, older, quieter, eyes softer but more certain. There was a strength in her I didn't recognize from the girl who once begged people to stay. Every now and then, I'd pass by a couple arguing on the street or holding hands so tightly it hurt to look at. I didn't feel envy anymore. I just hoped they'd be kind to each other. I hoped they'd learn to see what I hadn't, that love isn't proof of worth. It's a reflection of where you are in your own story. When I turned 40, I threw myself a small dinner. Just close friends, laughter, the smell of pasta sauce bubbling on the stove. Someone asked if I ever wanted to get married again, and I surprised myself by smiling instead of flinching. "I don't know," I said. "I think I already had the kinds of love that change you. Maybe the next one will just be easy." They laughed, but I meant it. A few months later, I took a trip, just me, to the coast. I rented a little house by the water and spent most of the time walking along the beach, watching the waves fold over themselves again and again. There's something humbling about the ocean, how it never stops moving, even when no one's watching. It reminded me of myself. One evening, as the sun was setting, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine and let myself think about all the people I'd loved. Not in a sad way, more like revisiting old friends in a dream. Ryan with his easy charm and laughter that felt like sunlight. Adrian with his intensity, the way he made everything feel urgent, alive. Alex with his quiet steadiness, the calm after so many storms. I wondered if they ever thought about me too. Maybe sometimes when a song came on the radio or when the air smelled like summer rain. Maybe they didn't. Either way, it didn't hurt anymore. The memories had softened into something warm, almost tender. They were the roots of who I'd become. I wrote in my journal that night, "Love never really leaves you. It just changes shape until it fits into the life you're living now." When I came back to the city, I noticed things I'd never paid attention to before, The way people laughed in coffee shops, the rhythm of traffic lights, the old couple who fed pigeons every morning near my building. Life wasn't waiting for me to figure it out. It had been happening all along. I didn't need someone else's story to make mine meaningful anymore. I didn't need closure from anyone but myself. Still, there were moments late at night when I'd feel that familiar ache, not loneliness exactly, but a kind of nostalgia for the girl who once believed love was supposed to be everything. I'd close my eyes and send her a little kindness, a quiet promise. You did the best you could. You kept trying. You didn't give up on love even when it gave up on you. One morning, on my way to work, I saw a man standing outside a cafe. Something about him, the tilt of his head, the way he smiled at the barista, made me pause. He looked up, caught my eye, and for a second it felt like the world stilled. Not in the dramatic, cinematic way it used to, but in a gentle, familiar way, the kind of stillness that asks nothing of you except to notice it. He smiled, I smiled back, and then we both went on with our day. That was enough. Because for the first time in my life, love didn't feel like something I was chasing. It felt like something that might find me, quietly, when I was ready. That night, as the city lights flickered through my window, I thought about how far I'd come, all the heartbreak, all the mistakes, all the versions of me that had lived and loved and lost. I whispered into the quiet, "Thank you." For every ending that led me here. For every person who taught me what love was and what it was. For the woman I'd become in the aftermath of it all. And then I turned off the light, lay back in my bed, and let the sound of the city lull me to sleep. Peace, I realized, wasn't the absence of love or longing. It was the gentle understanding that everything, every heartbreak, every goodbye had brought me home to myself. And that, in the end, was the love story I'd been writing all along.